a daughter, a sister, slips out of the house unaccompanied and meets a young man on the street corner, and they talk, or walk, or hold hands, or touch, or have sex. A disgrace. And so the girl comes home having been discovered, and she says, "Father, brother, family, I'm sorry." And they say, "That's all right. Forget it." You know better than that. You know that you do not remove dishonor brought on the family of a serious nature by someone merely saying, "Oh, I'm sorry," and someone else saying, "Forget it." What about the honor of God? When the honor of God has been offended, when you and I have brought shame on the very God who made us, what is to be done? Do you mean that we stand and say, "God, I'm sorry"? Or that we perform some sort of external ritual? Or that we even come with our heart and say, "With all of my heart I'm sorry," and I perform this ritual? No. God intervenes at that point, and here is the miracle of miracles. Jesus said in John 15, "Greater love has no man than this, that he lay down his life for his friends. And I now call you my friends." And so God sends Jesus as the one who will step in between, who will deal with the issue of the dishonor that we have brought on God, by making amends, by dying for us, as many a man or woman has died because they have dishonored their father or their brother or their sister. And the Quran talks about Abraham redeeming his son through a noble sacrifice. This is what God has done. He has redeemed us from the penalty due because we dishonor Him by a noble sacrifice. That sacrifice being Jesus, the one who steps between, the one who becomes the protector, the one who is the mediator or the intercessor, the one who takes the blow if there is a blow to be taken. And indeed, in issues of honor, there is always a blow to be taken. And so in John chapter 5, Jesus says, "Moreover, the Father judges no one, but has entrusted all judgment to the Son, that all may honor the Son just as they honor the Father. He who does not honor the Son does not honor the Father who sent him." I submit to you tonight that the crucifixion and the resurrection must be a reality. Otherwise, you and I are left with no hope, for we have offended the honor of God, and it is not so lightly set aside. Well, is all of this reasonable? That one would die for others? Reasonable? Yes. Above reason? Also, in some ways, yes. But it nonetheless is the act and the movement of God. A demonstration of God's love, a demonstration of God's mercy, a demonstration of God's justice, a forgiveness grounded in the very nature of God, demonstrating the very nature of God. I would submit to you tonight that any sort of hope for eternal life based on each one of us being good enough or performing the ritual well enough is a very, very shaky kind of hope. God is set forth in the Bible, and I think also set forth in Islam, is a God of justice a God who avenges, and also a God who is merciful and a God who is compassionate. Now, I suggest to you that it's very difficult to somehow harmonize those ideas. How can you be just and avenging of your honor and of the insult done to you, and at the same time be merciful and compassionate? By simply waving away the offense, that may be mercy and compassion, but where is justice? Where is the avenging nature? Do you discount it? Do you ignore it? Do you deny it? Does it cease to be? On the other hand, to bring the judgment, to exercise the justice, to avenge what happens, we all go to hell. And so what do? The response of the Injil, who is Jesus, is that in Jesus God set forth both His justice and His mercy and compassion in dealing with our rebellion, the insult we have done to Him, the dishonor that we have brought upon His holy name, by in effect stepping in between, taking our place, becoming our protector, bearing the blow that is ours, taking it upon Himself. As Jesus said, greater love has no man than this, that He lay down His life for His friends. And that is what Jesus did. Laid down His life for His friends, for all people who would look to Him and thus would depend upon Him in some degree of trust in His act, not in their goodness. Let me then make these last few comments as my time is going. 5 minutes? 5 minutes, okay. Let me suggest to you some of the things not being said tonight, and some of you aren't going to like to hear this. Some of you are going to say no, as some of my Christian brothers a moment ago were saying no. But I urge you to check your history, to check your scholars, to reach out and delve into the wide-ranging diversity within Islam and come to some answers. Let me suggest some things not being said tonight. Is the Bible reliable? No, it has variations in spelling. Is the Bible reliable? No, there are differences in interpretation. Is the Bible reliable? No, there are differences in translation. Is the Bible reliable? No, because sometimes you find the first verses of John 8 and the last verses of Mark 16, and sometimes you don't. Is the Bible reliable? No, because some of the stories in it sound rather like stories that you might find in pagan sources. Is the Bible reliable? No, because there are a number of scholars. Dr. Deedat can pull their quotations from his briefcase, from the Encyclopedia Biblica and others, that would say the whole business of the crucifixion and the resurrection is a hoax. I would submit to you tonight that he doesn't want to do that. Because you see, those scholars do not believe in God. They do not believe in the supernatural. And the criticisms that they level against the Bible, whether it be the crucifixion, the resurrection, or whatever else, they would level against the Quran, because they do not believe the Quran is from God. So I would hate to quote a man who doesn't believe the Quran to somehow prove that you shouldn't believe the Bible. You can't have it both ways. Ask about the presuppositions of those who are cited and whom you quote. But back to what I was saying. If someone wants to say, well, there are problems with the text of the Bible because there are variations in spelling. There are variations in spelling in places in the Quran. Does that prove it is not from God? Well, you would say, no, that doesn't prove it's not from God. But then if it doesn't prove that there, why does it prove it over here? Different interpretations. Oh, there are different interpretations of the Quran. Different versions. Well, there are different versions of the Quran, different translations. Missing verses, but the Quran has abrogations in it, does it not? Shaking your head, no. I read Muslim scholars who say there may be 250 verses that have been abrogated. So you disagree with your own scholars. Quran has materials from pagan sources? Well, maybe. Quran is not to be subjected to higher criticism? Well, we can understand that. The point simply is that if you are unwilling to entertain the possibility of considering these things with the Quran, you have no right to point to these things as regards the Bible. Still 5 minutes. Okay. Good. So, what does all this prove? Well, it simply says this. Reason and logic says that these things don't prove anything one way or the other. I mean, variations in the spelling within the Greek text of the Bible, what does it prove? Nothing more than variations in spellings in the Quran. Differences in translations into English or Indonesian or French, what does it prove? Nothing. Nothing about the Quran, nothing about the Bible, just that translators have a problem. The question of whether all of the verses are there or not. Well, in the Quran, we have a problem. We have a problem in that whatever variants existed were collected and destroyed. And your traditions record that. If only you will read your traditions. Now, in the Bible, in the bottom of the text of the Greek New Testament, all the variants are set out, and they are many. But how can you determine what is authentic if you don't have these things to look at? If there's nothing to check against, and yet the traditions record that there were differences, we're left somehow in a quandary. What I'm arguing for here, I hope you understand, is not an attack on the Quran. It's simply a case of saying, as we say in English, what's sauce for the goose is a gander. If you want to raise these arguments against the Bible, then in integrity, you must be willing to investigate these same arguments with regard to the Quran, because the same conditions exist there. From a Christian perspective, from the perspective of the Holy Book, the crucifixion of Jesus is not F-I-C-T-I-O-N, it is F-A-C-T. Jesus was crucified, he was killed, he died, he was buried, and 3 days later, he was raised from the dead. Either this is true on the basis of what the Holy Book says, or as Dr. Deedat has said, the whole thing is a fiction. And if it is a fiction, then somehow the God who sent Jesus as the most exalted of prophets and the one nearest him to bear his Injil to the world has failed. Failed for many centuries. Failed for at least 600 years. You may say, not failed ultimately, because maybe there it came back in the Quran and through Muhammad. But there's 600 years of failure. Now, I'm not quite sure what to make of a God who has 600 years of failure on his record. And yet somehow that is a part of the issue that we are having to deal with. I'll stop at that point.